ludicrous, infuriating. And yet, people emerge from it all the time, gasping and cheering, telling one another about the marvels they've seen, then rushing back in for more. Marvel Comics, as an artistic and commercial project, began in the early 1960s, initially as the work of a handful of experienced comics professionals. Artists Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, editor and writer Stan Lee, and a few others. The superhero stories that had dominated American comic books in the late 30s and early 40s had mostly fallen out of style at that point, but instead of returning to that faltering genre as it had been, Kirby, Ditko, and Lee combined it with aspects of the genres that had supplanted it. The uncanny horror of the monster and sci-fi stories Ditko and Kirby had been drawing more recently. The focus on emotion of the romance anthologies Kirby had helped to invent in 1947. The gently jabbing wit of the humor titles Lee had been writing for many years. That hybrid formula, absorbing monster comics and romance comics and humor comics into superhero comics, turned out to be irresistible and durable. Marvel's early stories responded to the atmosphere of their historical moment, sometimes explicitly in their content and always implicitly in their themes. Then Kirby, Lee, Ditko, and their collaborators figured out how to make the individual narrative melodies of all of their comics harmonize with one another, turning each episode into a component of a gigantic epic. That led to a vastly broader artistic collaboration. Ever since then, its writers and artists have been elaborating on one another's visions, sometimes set in the same place and time, but often separated by generations and continents. The big Marvel story is a funhouse mirror history of the past 60 years of American life. From the atomic night terrors of the Cold War to the technocracy and pluralism of the present day. A boisterous, tragicomic, magnificently filigreed story about power and ethics, set in a world transformed by wonders. In some of its deeper caverns, it's the most forbidding, baffling, overwhelming work of art in existence. At its fringes, it's so easy to understand and enjoy that you can read a 5-year-old an issue of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and she'll get it right away. And not even the people telling the story have read the whole thing. That's fine. Nobody is supposed to read the whole thing. That's not how it's meant to be experienced. So, of course, that's what I did. I read all 540,000 plus pages of the story published to date, from Alpha Flight to Omega the Unknown. Do I recommend anyone else do the same? God, no. Am I glad I did it? Absolutely. I've spent some of my happiest days exploring the Mountain of Marvels, and I wanted to get a better sense of what was in there so I could help curious travelers figure out how they might get inside it and how they might find the parts they'd like best. I went all out, so you don't have to. If you liked an Avengers movie and are interested in dipping a toe into its characters' comics, or read X-Men as a teenager and wonder what it's looked like since then, I'm here to help you have fun with that. I also wanted to see what the Marvel narrative said as a single body of work, an epic among epics, Marcel Proust times Doris Lessing times Robert Altman to the power of the Mahabharata. Note, the Mahabharata in its critical edition runs about 13,000 pages, which is roughly as many as all of the issues of The Incredible Hulk to date. As a cluster of overlapping serials, with dozens running in parallel at any given time, it has a different relationship with time and sequence than most kinds of narrative art have. It doesn't really have a beginning. Well, it does, but since mid-1961, where the story began is not where any member of the audience has ever been meant to join it. Instead, the Marvel story gives the reader tools to figure out the context from any entry point, reading backward and sideways as well as forward. Each individual piece of it on its own is fun, engaging, exciting, pleasing to the eye, or at least meant to be fun. But there's another different kind of fun that comes from piecing together the big story. Marvel's narrative also has a peculiar relationship with authorship. Legally, its maker is a corporation, one that's gotten bigger over time.